Welcome back to another episode of Elevate and Illuminate, the Empowerment Podcast. I'm your host, Jamarcus Fields, founder and executive director of Iron Sharpens Iron WAST. That is WAST, WAST, which stands for We Are Stronger Together. This season, we're digging deep into the realities of mental health, how we cope, how we carry things, and how we give ourselves permission to pause and heal. But today's episode hits home in a way no other could. Today, I have the honor of sitting down with someone whose strength, love, and resilience carried me through 26 years of incarceration in the Indiana Department of Corrections. She's more than just my mother. She's a mental health advocate, a quiet warrior, and a living example of what it means to endure, uplift, and never give up hope. She didn't just survive the storm, she stood in it for decades while I was away and while my brother served two federal sentences. And through it all, she stayed grounded, strong, and full of grace. In this episode, we're going to talk about the unseen side of incarceration, the emotional toll on families, the silent strength of mothers, and the ways we hold on to faith, wellness, and purpose even in the darkest seasons. If you've ever carried something heavy for someone you love, this episode is for you. Let's get into it. What's up? What's up?
What's up? What's up? Trying to get myself together there.
So, so as I stated, this is my mother. I'll allow her to introduce herself her way, and then we'll dig off into the conversation. The floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. My name is Barbara Brown. I'm an entrepreneur, a foster mom, a grandmother, a great grandmother, and I have a passion for the disabled and the lost and those that are suffering from mental challenges.
That part. So, first of all, thank you for being here. Um, we ended last season having a conversation and just knowing the glimpse that I had into your journey and the impact that my incarceration, my brother's incarceration, as well as trying to, you know, blaze your own path in life, just what that had on you. I thought it would be great to bring you back and dive into that side of the conversation. We always hear about, me and the time I did and the effects it had on me, what it did to me mentally, how I had to adjust and cope coming back into society. But seldom do we flip the coin over and look at the other side, the effects that it has had on family members, more specifically parents, loved ones, the kids, and what type of mental challenges they go through trying to navigate this system alongside us because of the decisions that we made. So let me start here. I'm telling you now, this first question is a loaded question, um, which comes in three parts, but I want to just dive straight into this. So during the 26 years that I was incarcerated, and while you were also supporting my brother through two different sentences in federal prison, how did you keep yourself mentally and emotionally grounded? What did that weight feel like? And how did you carry it?
Okay, that's a loaded question.
Very loaded. So I'm going to go back to the very first part of it. How did you keep yourself mentally and emotionally grounded?
It was hard, and I didn't. Um, I know somewhere along the line there, I had a breakdown, and I didn't recognize it was a breakdown because I think I used the term in our last podcast. I was functioning in my dysfunction,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody told me that I was being dysfunctional. So at first, I didn't recognize, I didn't know how to handle it. So I was just going through life.
Right.
It was, I know it was the day of your sentencing at court when I heard that judge say 60 years, but I didn't equate that 60 years meant half of that. I'm calculating 60 that you could possibly never come out
Right.
till I was corrected that you're only going to do half of that 60. And I thought there's a possibility. But the other thing I think that sent me down a rabbit hole was when you did get sentenced and that judge used a term which I can't get it out of my head. He said, you people move into my neighborhood. And then when I done research on the judge, I realized that he had family members that got hooked on drugs. He said thugs came into his neighborhood and corrupt his family. That I never could get past that statement. And if I know what I know now, I would have filed a disciplinary against that judge for making that statement because that was a racist, biased statement, and he shouldn't have been sitting on your case. But like I said, if I know what I know now, he's off the bench because he did the same corrupt things in somebody else's case. But
Right.
that bothered me, and that set a spiraling of mental health.
Right. So that I think that kind of attests to the weight of it. Um, so in light of all of that, and I think I've told you previously, like when I tried to put myself in your shoes and my dad's shoes, in terms of the things that y'all had to go through at that age that y'all were in life. When I look at myself and where my development was at that age, I was like, wow, like they on the outside looking in, y'all handled that.
Uh-huh.
Cause like I couldn't have handled it as gracefully as y'all did, especially at that age. Um, so in light of all of that and the reality, even though it was only have to do half of it, just the reality of those 26 years ultimately that I served that started out as 30, what did mental health look like for you during that period? And then how did it evolve? Did it eventually change? Like the more you got into it, or the more you learned, or the different ways you learned how to cope? What did it look like for you? And then how did it evolve? Because 26 years is a long time.
Oh yeah, it is. And I didn't know much about mental health. I knew that mothers were going through things because of their children incarceration. I've seen mothers have strokes, heart attacks, and I didn't label it as a mental crisis. I didn't know until I became a part of that uh, family, I guess is a word I can use. And then when you guys went in, I thought I had it all together because I had prayed that because around that era, you guys were not you guys, but you was out there. And I just wanted God to save my son any way he can. That was my prayer. But when God answered that prayer, because all your other friends, they're dead. They got shot down. Um, but when God answered my prayer, I didn't expect him to let you go that long down the road to save you or to redeem you. So I struggled mentally with the sentencing. I struggled mentally with the way the whole case went. Um, and I just dealt with it. And
Right.
then eventually, as the years went on, I fell off. And nobody ever told me I was dysfunctional. I was just going through life until one night I heard the Holy Spirit say it's time to come out. Because remember, we were reared. I brought you guys up in a holiness home. It may not have been right, but we were doing the best we could with what we knew. We brought you
Mm-hmm.
up in church. We brought you up in holiness. There's a big difference. And it was strict. And I know you guys didn't understand it. A lot of it I didn't understand it, but I was learning how to walk in the word. So yeah, I went down a rabbit hole and had to come up out of it. And when I came up out of it, I was able to see that this is what mothers go through. And I thank God for saving me, that I didn't lose my mind. I didn't get hooked on no drugs, none of that. I had to experience some things of the world that taught me now during my ministry how to relate to women that are hurting and are going through challenges with their children being incarcerated. Because there's nobody out here that can really talk to you except a person that's been through it. And I didn't have anybody to reach at and pull me and talk to me to redeem me, or at least minister to me as to how to handle this. And then I got angry with the church. The church wasn't there. They didn't do anything to help me. They didn't even understand what I was going through.
Right.
So where
Yeah.
people there's no such thing as church hurt, which I'm hearing, you hear that. That's the big slogan. There's no church hurt. Oh yeah, it is.
Yeah. I can imagine, because like back then, for one, mental health was not a topic that we discussed in our communities, that was discussed in our homes.
It was
During
taboo.
that era, huh?
Taboo to talk about mental health in the Black
It,
community, because when you
exactly.
yeah, and I've been fostering, and you guys know I've been fostering for decades upon decades. And when you talk about mental health, they think, oh, she's seeing a psychiatrist. They put on some happy pills. That's what the foster kids call them, happy pills. They ain't call them psychotropic medication. It was happy pills.
Hmm.
So it was taboo for the Black community to talk about mental challenges or mental health.
Right. So during that period, it being taboo to talk about, so I'm gonna go on a limb and say that you had no one to talk to or vent to about what was going on. So, what helped you push through?
Reading the Bible, prayer, and I got back into church because I realized that we are the church. So by me being angry with the church, it's not the building, it's not the pastor, it's not the minister, it's not the prophet, the pastor, it's none of those. It's your relationship with God. So I got back in the Word, and I just threw myself in, talking and praying to God and letting the Holy Spirit lead me.
Mm.
That's when I realized I needed counseling. I need a therapist. I need somebody
Right.
to vent to. I need to get this stuff out of me. And it wasn't
Right.
nothing that I announced, because, like I said, it was taboo. The Black community, you don't talk about you going to see a psychiatrist or a therapist, and which is a big difference I found out over the years. Seeing a psychiatrist or seeing a therapist is totally different. I see a therapist, and I still do it to this day. And for the 15 years, I wouldn't tell anybody that I was seeing a therapist. And then when I blurted it out, then they said, I'm seeing a therapist too. And I thought, really? How you like it? It was like, you got to keep a secret. You got to keep it a secret. Can't let anybody know you're seeing a therapist.
Yeah, they couldn't believe you said it out loud.
And they couldn't believe I said it out loud. I said, if I don't see my therapist, I will be downtown in 412. I said, I forgot. Y'all don't call it 412 no more. Y'all call it the Allen County Jail.
So, you know, Can you enlighten us? I just heard you say about there being a vast difference between a therapist and a psychiatrist.
Yes.
And what is the difference?
A
Because I
therapist is,
tried to snatch that in my head and try to break it up, and I'm like, okay, let me just ask.
yeah. A therapist is someone that, like a counselor, you go and talk to. You can vent, bounce ideas, things you're dealing with, you're going through, and they can, kind of help navigate you through that. A psychiatrist only prescribe medication for the symptom. They diagnose you and they give you some medication.
Got you. Okay, we have a question in the chat. And for anybody that's just joining us, please feel free to drop any comments or questions in the chat. Stephanie commented, church hurt is real and can be damaging. There is even a condition that is named for this type of psychological and sometimes physical condition. Um, Jen, who is, by seeing that correct, is joining us from South Africa. Welcome, Jen. Nice to have you here. She said, did you have a good support structure? I noticed that sometimes people want to put distance between certain situations when you expect them to be there for you.
That's an awesome question. No, I did not have a support system. It seems like I was taboo. I had a plague. People ran from me um, when my son was charged with his crime. And even during the proceedings, I was the only one down there. Everybody took off running. So you're dealing with that. You're dealing with all this other psychological trauma, and then
Mhm.
you have family, friends, everybody's scattering because it was almost like you had the plague, and I had to walk out the door with my head stuck up and my shoulders back as if I ain't did nothing wrong.
Right. Yeah, nobody wants to at that point it was so taboo in our
Uh,
communities that I get it. It was almost like nobody wanted to be associated with the crazy lady.
yeah, yeah.
Because ultimately that's how they gauged that. That's how they termed and judged people who were doing that. Um, and
But then
Jerry
your
put
case
the
was so publicized because they were trying to make an example of you. Nobody wanted to be associated with not only a lady they thought was crazy or different, but her son, chased somebody down according to the news reports and everything, and murdered somebody.
right,
Was found guilty, but you were found eventually guilty, but you were innocent until proven guilty. But as soon as you were labeled and charged, everybody scattered. Nobody didn't want to have anything to do with you. Even,
right.
even the church.
True statement. So Jerry's commented, holding things in can create an unpredictable outcome as far as when it finally comes out of you. Venting is a must for a healthy mental state. I agree, Jerry. I agree. I agree. Holding things in is one of the worst things that we can do.
Exactly.
Um, because it basically becomes a cancer in us mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. Um, and then when it does come out, it comes out in all the wrong ways. Like once it boils over, it's almost like you lose control and you lack emotional intelligence. So it comes out however it comes out, and you just have to deal with the consequences because you didn't let it get so far gone that you lost control of it. So I'm big on venting. I try to tell as many of the brothers and sisters that do come home from incarceration that it is pivotal. that they have someone around them that they can talk to, that can, that they feel comfortable being transparent in front of them and not worrying about judging, because a lot of the stuff that we're going to vent and share about, we don't really understand.
Mhm.
We don't, even though we live through it, a lot of it we don't understand. It's like my mom talked about going through the motions. A lot of our period of incarceration, we were going through the motions, just
Mhm.
trying to survive for years. Um, so a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with, we don't really understand. It wasn't like we keyed in and focused on it. Like mental health was a focus area for us while we were doing time. Like, and if we're being real about it, mental health has just now become a regular conversation.
That's because
Like,
of what's going on in the world. It's become a regular conversation, but and that's what they everybody's saying. It's a mental health issue. Well, it's been a mental health issue.
correct.
Yeah, and like you said, if you hold it in, that's why I needed a therapist. I needed somebody that I can vent to, share with, that I know I'm not going to hear it on Facebook. You're not going to post what I said or
Right,
how I'm thinking or how I'm feeling. So I chose to find me a therapist that I can just be me, say what I want to say, get it out, and then they can come back and ask me now how you feel, or do you
right,
think it could have went another way, uh, but before that, like you said, when that stuff all bobbles up in you, it comes out, and mine came out in anger because I've always had a anger issue. You know, I just hate injustice. You can't get none sideways with me because I'm gonna come back at you sideways. So
hmm,
mine was the anger, and some of the anger that was coming out before I recognized that I'm dealing with some mental health issues. It was so overboard, and I used to tell my therapist, I ain't scared of nobody, but I'm scared of me, because once I go there, it's hard for me to come back. So I choose my environment, I choose where I go, I choose um, who I associate with, because if you push that button, I couldn't come back. I go
right.
left.
A hard left too. I I done seen some of them left hand turns. A hard left. Oh man. So and Stephanie just put a question in before I even go into that. Get out of my head, Steph, because that was my next question anyway. So what would you say to other mothers who are silently suffering as they support their children through incarceration?
I would tell them, like one thing you did when you were incarcerated, you introduced me to Kairos. And I love Kairos because we get a group of women that we minister to on the weekends. And what I tell those women, and then I come down to Noblesville to Hamilton County Jail and I minister to those women down there in jail. I tell them that there are a lot of voices out here, and you have to know which voice is speaking to you. So when you get in one of those little tight spots, you need to find somebody that you can talk to, that you can let your thoughts out with. But you can't talk to everybody because everybody is not going to understand you. But I try to encourage them to seek a therapist. I mean, that's the safest net you can ever have, because a therapist ain't gonna repeat it unless she gets subpoenaed because you done something and they got to get your records. Like they did me one time. I didn't realize that all this talking I'm doing in therapy, I better be careful, because if I say I'm ready to go get somebody, I'm gonna do something. They could subpoena them records and
Right,
be held against me. So, and my therapist even told me that. I'm not going to write that down. And she told me why. So I had a Christian therapist, and that was another thing that was important to me, that I find not a secular therapist, a Christian therapist that can minister to me as well as be my therapist. But
right,
I tell these mothers all the time, and I walk them through some things. Some of them still got children in jail and prison. And I, let them know sometimes some of the games that being played.
Yeah. So we got a few more comments in the chat. Jen says, "I'm sorry that you had to experience that, Mom. It's not nice to feel alone. The good part about that is knowing where you stand with the people who you thought were your people."
That for sure.
Good point.
That for sure.
Gary said, while doing 12 years flat, he definitely learned the hard way in dealing with his anger and how to properly release them negative thoughts and feelings. And some people will make you feel you can talk to them, then use it against you.
Yep. That for sure.
That, that definitely,
That's why I'm such a
yeah,
big advocate of, I think, especially anybody that's been incarcerated for any period of time, you need a therapist. Because there's
right,
some things you want to talk about that you can't talk about with your mama, your wife, your brother. There's some things you want to deal with when you're out that, you don't want to be, like you said, you don't want to be judged.
right. And makes it, yeah, it makes it hard to trust,
Mhm.
when
Especially if
you
you got
get
trust issues.
when right when you especially when you have trust issues because you've been burnt before, or your words, someone has used what you shared against you. It makes it hard, because I know, like, for me, my mentality was, if I'm not comfortable enough to share with loved ones, people who I thought were Team Marcus, then how much more comfortable am I supposed to be talking to a stranger? And that was my mentality for a long time.
Really?
And I know, yeah, that was my mentality for a long time.
Wow.
It,
See,
it,
I'm
it,
the opposite. I'd rather talk to a stranger than talk to a loved one.
and I get it. That definitely not saying that my way of thinking was right, but that's how I thought for a long time, which made it hard for me to talk and open up to anybody,
Hmm. Wow.
because it's like the closest people to me. Like, this is where I got how I measure love, from these people around me. And so, it's like I used to always tell people, like, when you dealing with an individual, I used to be like, if somebody fall out with their mom, like, say their mom crosses them, does them bad, what kind of trust and faith do they have in anybody else?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
so that was my philosophy. Like, I come from an era and a generation where family was everything when I left and went to prison.
that's when you left and went to prison. But it has drastically changed.
I mean, I get that, but let's understand arrested
Y-
development. For somebody who's been gone 26
Right.
years, I didn't witness the change.
Yeah.
So my measuring stick came from that. This
Yeah.
is what shaped my way of thinking, my way of doing things. And as I'm sitting in prison, realizing that everybody who, you know, that I felt loved me, or who told me they loved me, then left me. So how then do I begin to trust people I'm just meeting or don't know,
Mhm.
when those who love me, that I've bent back over backwards for, and then, threw rocks at the penitentiary for, then turn their back on me? It soured me, and it created some grave trust issues with me, and walls I put up that, if I did know how to take them down, I don't know that I wanted to, because I felt safe inside those walls I put up.
Yeah. And it's funny you said that because that's what my therapist said. He said my walls are so thick that I enjoy being alone. And I do. I enjoy, and you could probably witness that. I enjoy traveling by myself. Somebody asks to go with me, I get mad. I don't want you to go with me. I've been doing this by myself and I enjoy it. But then you got other family members that say it's dangerous out there. Be careful. I said, I've been doing this for so long. I know how to navigate. But those walls, that's what I didn't realize that I had up. And those walls are starting to come down. The therapist said, your walls are so high and so thick. If somebody wanted to get through, I said, they can't. I said, I said, I was in the Walgreens one day. I was telling her a therapist, and I think you were on the phone. And a gentleman came up behind me. I forgot what he said, but I chopped him up so bad. You said, "What did you say?" That was cold blooded or something. And I had to catch myself because I thought, "Oh wow, that was rude. I was very rude." But at least now I'm catching myself. I'm realizing when I say something out of whack, and I can go back and apologize but yeah, it's a challenge, and it still is a challenge.
Right. That just so this segment just made me think of something. So, and it was a segment, and then the statement that the last statement Jerry just made in the chat, where he says, especially in prison when you're surrounded by manipulation and predator mind states. So, in terms of this mental health relationship building, you got, let's just use me and you as an example. So I'm in prison. I done went in at 18 years old. I done developed trust issues. I'm not really wanting to like open up and like bear the real me and be transparent with people. So I put these walls up that I'm comfortable residing inside. Not never mind the 40-foot prison wall. I done put walls up around me as an individual that, if I'm being completely real, those walls were not taken down before I came home. So I came home with those walls still around me.
Mhm.
And there was only one person that managed to break through those walls in 26 years. And when I came home, I married her. She was the only person that was able to break inside of those walls that I put up around myself. So now hearing you, and that you got these thick walls up around you, I'm seeing in a lot of situations when guys come home based off the mental turmoil that their family members have had to go through, they put up walls. Then we're coming home with walls up. How are we really communicating? Like, are we yelling over the walls at each other through life? Like when you look at that picture, like that's a powerful picture
Yeah.
that you have a son who comes home to his mom. Mom embraces him, but they both have walls up,
Uh-huh.
thick walls
Uh-huh.
that they're comfortable inside of.
Uh-huh.
So, if at what point do we break through each other's walls? But up until that point, what are we really doing? Because if we're comfortable inside of those walls, we're technically not being transparent.
And that's true, because
That's
you got two individuals with some walls up that, like you said, you might be able to yell over that wall, and I might be able to hear you, but I may not. I may just ignore what you're saying because
right. Or
my wall is so high that trust and that being comfortable inside that wall has been what I've been living with for years.
that's wow, when you really look at that, that's powerful. When you talk about this mental health and this communication and
Huh?
you know relationship building or repairing, that's that's something else. Because it's like while you're trying to rebuild this relationship, like, have you really let your walls down? Like you say you want to rebuild the relationship, but are you really trusting enough to really let that person in? And all that comes with them, because if we still got these walls up and we're inside, we're still dealing with some unresolved stuff
True. True.
inside of that wall. So if you're used to dealing with it by yourself, um you may not know how to deal with or handle it with someone else inside of that space with you.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So used to handling it by yourself. Their response or their reaction to it actually might trigger you. So in a lot of ways, you feel like it's safe in here because I don't have to explain to nobody what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, why I think the way that I think. If you don't like it, then stay outside my wall.
And
Like you ain't gotta be in here.
that's my thinking. That's my thinking.
And if I'm being all the way real, that's really where that comes from. Because as I look at you, of course, from the outside looking in, I see that in the way you carry yourself and your demeanor. Like, I'm cool in here. You don't like what I'm doing inside my walls, then get back out. I didn't want you in here anyway. And I see that, but again, it brings the question of how many other mothers, fathers, loved ones, children are dealing with this same thing and suffering in silence and not saying nothing.
You'd be surprised how many mothers that have children that are incarcerated that have that same mentality. They got this wall up, they're very quiet. It's amazing how when we do the Kairos weekend, that Friday, everybody's so standoffish and everybody don't want to participate and because they're filling things out.
Right.
They filling things out. They want to, and I can attest to when I first went. At first I didn't want to go because I said, I don't want to be around no people. It might be a cult, and I don't want to be no part of that. So when I went, I was the same way that first 2 days, as a matter of fact. And then when I realized what it was really about, then I relaxed. But there are so many mothers, and they don't realize that it's a mental health challenge they're dealing with. They have a trust issue. They've been through so much. They've been rejected by families because, like you said, when you went in, family was everything. They said, blood is thicker than water. Not no more. A lot of the family members are your enemies, and if you're not careful, they'll put you down.
Right.
But times have changed, and it's not with you know everybody's family is dealing with something, and there's always a challenge that the of the love walk.
Right.
And I've dealing over the years with these adult women that they have so many issues and so many challenges and nobody to really talk to.
Wow. Yeah, I imagine it's probably a little harder um for women, just because in my opinion, women are more prone to want to talk and share, whereas men aren't.
Uh-huh.
Like sharing your struggles and your fears and your concerns as a man is perceived as a weakness.
Well, see, that's what it used to be. Women used to. It was so easy for us to talk, but
Right.
over the years, it has changed. Women don't want to share too much. As a matter of fact, most women don't even want to hear your issues. They got their own issues. They don't want to deal with yours. They're dealing with theirs. And then you can kind of pick up, a couple women say, well, I used to talk to such and such and such and such, but they don't even pick up their phone anymore. And I say, you know why? Because they probably dealing with their own issue and your issue is a little bit too heavy for them.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
every mother is going through it that has a son incarcerated. And like you
Right.
said, I tell them you got to get that stuff out of you because that stuff will fester in you and make you sick. And I knew that from firsthand experience. Once I started releasing and forgiving people that I thought should have been there, could have done something, could have, assisted me or whatever it could have been. Once I released it and forgave them, I had to move on. They couldn't help me. They weren't supposed to help me. This was a spiritual walk that I had to go to.
Mm. So
And
before
it's hard for most women that to talk to anybody when they got a child incarcerated. They feel
right,
embarrassed. Like I said, nobody want to hear it.
right. Mm. So we had another question in the chat. This was back up a little ways, but it said, "What strategies did you learn from your therapist that helped you in communicating with your sons so that anger was never targeted toward them?"
I don't think I ever showed any anger towards you guys. Um, I don't think it ever came out on you guys when you came home because I had already learned to be quiet and listen. Because I think in that last podcast when I was interviewing you, I said you don't know me and I don't know you.
Right,
We're learning each other. So I've learned to just sit back and be quiet and just observe and not be judgmental, knowing that you guys went through something all those years in there and I went through something. So we're both watching each other, trying to see, okay, how is this going to play out?
right. So it was also asked, would you consider doing family therapy together?
Um, with you guys, I've done family therapy before with my foster kids, but I've never done family therapy with you guys. But that would be an awesome, that would be awesome. I
Yeah,
don't,
it's crazy. I never
I
thought about
Junior
that,
would
but
do it because I tried to get Junior to go to family therapy and he don't need a therapist, he said.
that part,
Yeah,
that part.
yeah,
I'm gonna, I'm gonna leave that right there.
yeah.
Um,
But yeah, family therapy is wonderful.
yeah, I had never thought about that. I think that would actually be a good idea, and not just for us, but for any families. Um,
Mhm.
I think that would be a good move doing some family therapy. Wow, great question. Um, out of out of interest sake, this is from Jen. Out of interest sake, is there a support group for people that have incarcerated family members? Okay, and it's already been answered in the chat. Uh, thank you for those that didn't catch that. Out of interest sake, is there a support group for people that have incarcerated family members? And here at Iron Sharpens Iron, we have a Just Family network that meets virtually every fourth Tuesday of the month. Um, and I'm sure we can get information on how you can get connected to that in the chat throughout this episode. But thank you for asking.
But you probably are
No,
the only ones doing it. There are no support groups for incarcerated family members. Well, I guess you can say Kairos is,
right.
and
Yeah,
you got there's a couple more out there like Kairos that minister to those that are incarcerated. So there's yeah, I guess there are organizations out there that do that, but it's not well known.
it's not well known. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I was just thinking that, like, even with our Just Fun Family Network, when the idea came up about a support system, a support team for the
Mhm.
family members, I was like, that is an absolutely amazing idea.
Yeah.
Because
Awesome idea.
when you talk about the reentry, the immediate attention is on the returning citizens,
Hmm.
as if the family didn't go through this with us, and have their own things that they're dealing with, own mental health challenges that they're dealing with in the process. You know, we've mentioned in one of the previous episodes that I did, um, and I can't remember who the guest was at this particular conversation, but we talked about how individuals can come home from prison and your loved ones have created a way to adapt that they cope with what they had to go through, and it becomes routine, it becomes part of their norm. This is now their default setting, and then suddenly you finished your sentence, you are returned, you come home, and your presence alone can be a trigger
Yep.
because they've gotten so caught up in the routine and what has become normal that they didn't stored that somewhere in the back of their mind and they really hadn't thought about it for a long time. But now your presence is a constant reminder. And so the soon as you touch ground, we're looking and expecting this warm reception, but we have just triggered some
Figured.
people's trauma, and now they're struggling and trying to cope while trying to accept you.
Yeah.
So that's a positive pushing against a positive, or a negative pushing against a negative,
Yeah.
um, in that instance. So like, but one thing I realized, like, I think our Just Family Network can be, it definitely is an amazing support team that can be so much bigger if more, it's about getting the word out there and getting people to know the resources there, that it's available. And it's in how how you market, how you really get it out there and let people know. Word of mouth, social media, different things. It's about learning. It used to be, word of mouth was the greatest advertising tool. It like has been our whole life. But now you get to this place of how social media has taken over, like, you just saying something misses the mark. You got to be able to, like, really hook, line, and sinker somebody to, like, really reel them in, because the attention span is so short. How do you get people's attention to even tell them the help that you need is over here?
Well, it's
Unless
just
you,
like
and
Cairo. When Kairos came in there, you guys put the word out there to your family, and then it just, like a domino effect. You gotta get into the prison and let them know there's support system for the family that's available out here. Because, like you just said, you're coming home with your trauma, and they've been living with their trauma and dealing with life on a daily basis. Then when you come, you like you said, you're triggering something with them, and then now they got to make room for you with your issue and their issue.
right.
So I mean, it's needed. I mean, I the only thing I can say is I would invest in some billboards. That'd be the loudest sound I can make. I would make.
Mhm.
Know that is out there, that service is available, because it is desperately needed. Mothers are they don't know what to do with themselves. They're trying to cope, they're trying to deal. And I mean, the games that some of the incarcerated play on their parents that lost their homes. One lady, she still calls me from Avon. I met her in Kairos uh, when you were in there, and she's on her third marriage because financially,
Wow.
all, and I think you know where I'm going with that, but
Mhm.
um, she was on her third marriage, and I said I wouldn't let him make me lose this husband.
Right.
I said,
Wow.
you got somebody chasing him, making him send you money to keep him alive in there. I'll give you some numbers. I said, you can go downtown Indianapolis to the state house, sit there and tell them you talk to somebody trying to uh, 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 kill your son.
Right.
But I mean, parents are going through a lot with the, you know. I thank God I can't. I still got my mind
Right.
because I had two of you guys, and then people would look at me and they think I had it all together. I didn't have it all together. I just looked like I had it all together, and they said, "Wow, you got two in prison." I used to wouldn't say you guys were in prison. I said, "Oh, I got one living in Michigan City. I got one living,"
Right.
and then I was going to Florida every month to see Junior, and I would say, "Oh, I'm finna go on vacation. I'll be back." You know, but and then finally I was able to say I got one incarcerated, and that was when I did a talk through Kairos. They had me do a talk, and they couldn't believe it. They said, "You got two sons in prison?" I said, "Oh yeah." I said, "So don't let this fool you." I said, "Because we're all dealing with something."
Right.
But you can dress it up and make it look like you're all together and everything, but these parents are going through something. Like I said, I don't know a parent yet that has a child that's incarcerated that's not dealing with a lot of trauma.
Right.
And of course, you guys don't know that because we don't share that with you. We act like we got it all together. Oh, mom, I need $200. Okay, I'll send it to you. Then they sitting here worried, sick because they're already behind in bills, but they're gonna make sure you get that money.
Right. Uh, so Jen just asked, oh, Jordan asked also, Stephanie, can you put the Just Family info in the chat, please? And Jen asked, Marcus, even though you are physically free, how long did it take your mind to adjust? Good question.
Hmm.
Um, so I came home in 2019, um, after serving 26 years. So next month I will be celebrating 6 years home. And if I'm being completely honest, I'm still adjusting.
I was just gonna say, I
Yeah, I'm still adjusting. I went to prison at 18. So I spent 18 years of my life in society. Developmental years. Like I hadn't even fully developed mentally, physically, none of that. Like, my shoe size still was growing while I was in prison. Like so I hadn't even finished developing, but I had 18 years. Then as I started to transition into adulthood and like really gather my true identity and who I was, that took place in prison where I spent 26 years, which if we doing the math is 8 more than I spent in society. So if you look at where I've spent my life and what has had the most influence on developing the character that is sitting before you, it's prison.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I had to tell one of the wardens one time before I left the prison because she told me that prison had made me too smart. And I'm like, what did y'all expect? I've
Right,
done more of my life in prison than I have in society. So
right.
you should be more scared of me in prison than free in the world because I don't know that world out there anymore. So I came out here, I might as well had been placed in the middle of the planet Mars and just told to figure it out, figure out how to breathe, figure out how to cultivate the land, figure out how to live, because I was lost. And so life has become learning to me. I look for areas and opportunities to learn and to grow every single day because I'm still adjusting and I'll probably still be adjusting for a while. I'm doing pretty good. When I first came home, I was real good at masking stuff. Um,
Uh-huh.
People, like my mom just mentioned, people thought I was okay, thought I had it together because I know how to use my words. You know, very well. So people thought that I was okay, but I wasn't. I was struggling inside, trying to adjust, trying to figure things out. When you've come home, I came home 44 years old, but in a lot of areas, when we talk in arrested development, a lot of me came home still an 18-year-old boy. But there were the expectations of a 44-year-old man. So I did what we as men are taught to do. I held my head up high, I poked my chest out, and I just dug into it. And so everybody thought I was okay. That was what I would call, and I don't mean this in a literal sense, but that was part of my unraveling. Because when you do that, you give this false sense of security that you have everything under control.
Uh-huh.
So when you get to a point of being overwhelmed and the weight of the world and your problems crushing you, nobody comes to your aid because you've given off this impression that you got it all together.
Uh-huh.
So nobody even knows to ask you if you need help. And
Uh-huh.
I found myself sitting back like, man, I give and I pour so much into other people. Like, who pours into me? And I had to be real with myself and look in the mirror and say, probably nobody, because you give off as if you got everything under control.
Exactly.
So nobody really knows that you're hurting or that you're struggling or that you need help or that you need some assistance because you give this aura that you got everything under control. And that's what I talk about, being vulnerable and being willing to be transparent. Everybody's struggling with something.
Right.
Everybody is recovering from something.
Yeah.
Everybody needs some sort of help, some sort of assistance.
Exactly. Exactly. And see, I see myself in you a lot. I see you in me because you move and like you said, everybody looks at me as well and think, because she got it all together. She dressed well, she speaks, she's not. But if you push that button, then that other part come out, and that's when the shock hits everybody.
Right.
My therapist says, she said, you got PTSD. I said, I probably do. But I have to recognize, I have recognized over the years those trigger points. I know what point, how far I can go and where I can go. And if they start pushing that button, how to get out of there.
Right.
But like you said, everybody's dealing with something. You just
Absolutely.
have the person to vent to. Once you can get that, have a person that you can vent to on a regular basis, it helps.
Yeah. Yeah. So, um, I stated last week that dealing with this topic of mental health, this is a conversation that could just keep going and going and going, and we can always find stuff to talk about. Always, and being a respecter of time, we're about at the hour mark. I want to cap this off. I have two questions that I really wanted to tap into. So I'll hit you with these and then give you the floor for some closing remarks. And then we'll get ready to let everybody get back to their regular programs. But um, how do you continue to take care of your mental and emotional health now that both of your sons are home and rebuilding their lives?
I still do my therapist every other Wednesday, and once a month I take a weekend, and I get away. I do some R&R time.
Good stuff. Good stuff. And lastly, what role does forgiveness of self, of the system, of the circumstances play in your mental health journey?
A lot, because the Bible tells us we have to forgive, and if you don't understand forgiveness and walk in forgiveness and in love, because everybody is doing what they think is right in their own eyes. So
Right.
what I'm doing, you might not understand it, but that's okay. because what you're doing and the way you or they do it, that's okay. That's the way they see life. But it's not for me to. I don't judge. Um,
Right.
yeah, I don't judge anybody, and I can be around all kind of people, and I don't judge, and that's why they love my presence around them because they know that I am sold out for Christ. But at the same time, they need to work out their own soul salvation. It's not for me to be preaching at them or telling them that they're sinning because everybody know when they sin. It's
Right.
just me to walk in love with them. So forgiveness plays a huge part in your mental health.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody that tuned in. Um, this has been episode 2 of Elevate and Illuminate. Make sure y'all, for one, hit the subscribe button to the channel. We are here every Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Um, Again, this season, our focus will be on mental health. So every week we will be having a conversation surrounding mental health. We will have a host of mental health advocates, mental health trainers, um, individuals with their own personal lived experience, sharing their stories and challenges with mental health, um, how they cope, how they heal, how they grow, and just knowing that it's okay to give yourself permission to pause, to literally and figuratively take a deep breath, assess what's going on, look in the mirror, be real with yourself, and figure out how you can best cope with this and who you have, what resources in terms of people that you have that are really there for you and that you can use or lean on during this journey. This conversation is one I'll never forget, not just because it's personal, but because it speaks to the quiet, powerful strength that so many mothers carry every day. The kind of strength that doesn't always get recognition, but holds entire families together. To my mom, thank you for your unwavering love, your resilience, and for showing us that mental health isn't about always being okay. It's about learning how to keep going with grace, even when things fall apart. And to all the listeners who are holding space for someone else while trying to hold yourself together, I hope this conversation reminds you that you're not alone, that your mental health matters, that healing is possible, even in the hardest places. So until next time, keep rising, keep healing, and keep illuminating the path for someone else. Peace and love. See y'all again next week.